There's a kind of guilt that doesn't leave when you sleep. It's there when you wake up. It follows you into conversations, into quiet moments, into rooms full of people where you're smiling, but somewhere underneath, something just won't let go. And here's what's strange. That feeling isn't new. It's ancient. 4,000 years ago, in a desert, God did something about it that most people have never heard properly explained. He killed a goat and sent another one walking into the wilderness. And what happened on that day, in a tent with a high priest trembling in plain white linen, surrounded by thousands of people watching in complete silence, is either the most important ritual in human history or the strangest thing you've ever heard. We're talking about Leviticus. And no, don't click away. I know what you're thinking. You've heard the jokes. The book everyone abandons 3 chapters in. The one with the strange laws about fabric blends and animal blood and skin diseases. But here's what nobody tells you. Leviticus is not a rule book. It's not ancient religious bureaucracy. It is a crime scene. And if you follow the clues slowly, carefully, from the very first verse to the very last, you end up standing in front of the oldest, most breathtaking answer to that guilt that just won't leave in the morning. So let's do this properly, from the beginning. The book opens with something easy to miss if you're not paying attention. God doesn't speak from a mountain this time. No thunder, no earthquake, no smoke and fire at a distance the way Exodus left things. Leviticus 1:1 says the Lord called to Moses and spoke to him from inside the tent of meeting, from within the tabernacle, the portable dwelling Israel had built in the wilderness. That detail is doing enormous quiet work. The same God who showed up at Sinai with enough fire and noise to terrify an entire nation is now speaking in close quarters, on purpose. The intimacy is intentional. He is trying to close the gap. But there's a tension built into that closeness, and Leviticus is honest about it from the start. The people he's drawing near to are people who keep getting things spectacularly wrong, and he is, by every measure, terrifyingly, completely, unstoppably holy. Not metaphorically holy, not politely holy. The kind of holy that is a force. And a force like that, pressing toward people like that, creates a collision. How does anyone survive that? How does a broken, frequently disobedient, wandering people live next door to a God like that without being destroyed? That is the actual question of Leviticus. Not what can I eat and not how do I dress. Everything else is scaffolding around this one question. And the first answer God gives is a language, a vocabulary he teaches Israel to speak, one offering at a time. The first 5 chapters introduce 5 different kinds of offerings, and if you've always skimmed past them, you've been skipping God's attempt to name every kind of broken thing a human being can experience. The burnt offering in chapter 1, an entire animal consumed on the altar, nothing held back, nothing retained. It's the language of total surrender. Everything, not a portion, not a representative sample. Everything on the fire. The grain offering in chapter 2 is quieter, no blood, just flour and oil and salt, and it's saying something different. Even the ordinary work of your hands, the everyday stuff, belongs to God, even your Tuesday. Then the peace offering, almost festive by comparison. Part goes to God, part to the priest, part to the person who brought it. A shared meal across the distance between creator and creature. You can almost feel the exhale in it. But then it gets more honest. The sin offering in chapter 4 is specifically for unintentional sin, the things you didn't even know you were doing wrong, the ways you've damaged something without realizing it. And here's what stops me about that. God doesn't wait for you to figure out what you did. He builds the remedy into the system before you even discover the problem. And then the guilt offering in chapter 5, for situations where you've actually harmed someone else, broken a trust, withheld something owed. There's a restitution component. You don't just bring an animal, you pay back what you took plus a penalty. Acknowledgement and repair in the same gesture. 5 offerings, 5 categories of human brokenness, each given a name and given an answer. God isn't saying you're terrible. He's saying, I see exactly what's broken, and I've prepared exactly what you need. If that's landing for you, if you're starting to feel like maybe the God of this book actually sees your specific mess, your specific weight, I want you to type "He makes a way" in the comments right now. Not as a YouTube thing, as a real declaration that you believe, or you're beginning to believe, that there is a way through what you're carrying. Chapters 6 and 7 hand the detailed instructions over to the priests, how to maintain the sacrificial system, how to handle the offerings. And one detail keeps repeating in a way that's hard to ignore. The fire on the altar must never go out. Leviticus 6:13 says it plainly. Not at night, not on quiet days, not when things feel routine. The altar is never closed. God is not available by appointment. Someone is always tending the fire, always feeding it. The provision never pauses, not even while Israel sleeps. Then comes chapter 8, and everything slows down. Aaron, Moses' brother, is being dressed for the most significant role in Israel's entire religious life. The garments go on one at a time. Tunic, sash, the robe of blue, the ephod with the 12 stones, each one carved with the name of a tribe, the breastplate, the turban with the gold plate that reads, "Holy to the Lord." Each piece placed by Moses, each piece anointed with oil. He doesn't just get dressed, he gets transformed. He walks into this ritual as one man and walks out carrying an entire nation on his body, the 12 tribes on his shoulders, the 12 names on his chest. He is being shaped by his garments into something larger than himself, a bridge between the people and the God who wants them near. That's not ceremony, that's theology and fabric. Chapter 9 is joy.
Pure, overwhelming, unexpected joy. The first day of actual worship. Aaron approaches the altar in his official capacity for the first time, and when it's done, when the last offering is complete, fire comes out from the presence of God and consumes everything on the altar. And the people, all of them, shout and fall on their faces. Leviticus 9:24. That is genuine euphoria. That's the feeling of contact, of knowing something real just happened, that God actually showed up. It's the best moment in the entire early section of this book. And then chapter 10 arrives, and everything shatters. Nadab and Abihu, Aaron's sons, just ordained, full of zeal, fresh from the ceremony, new priests who have just watched fire come down from heaven. They take their censers, put fire and incense in them, and offer what the text calls unauthorized fire, fire that God had not commanded. And immediately fire comes out from the presence of God and consumes them, dead on the spot, in front of their father. Don't rush past this. I'm not going to let you rush past this. Moses turns to Aaron and says, essentially, don't mourn, don't tear your clothes, don't uncover your head, because you are still the high priest, still serving, still needed. The congregation requires you to keep functioning. And Leviticus 10:3 says simply, Aaron was silent. 2 words. His sons are dead. The only response available to him is silence. And what's beneath that silence is not cruelty, it's a revelation. Nadab and Abihu didn't die because God is unpredictable or brutal. They died because the tabernacle was not a place where you improvised. It was the most dangerous real estate on earth, the dwelling place of a God who is actually, genuinely, categorically holy. And holiness changes things. It means approach is not casual. Nearness is not cheap. Something real and irreversible happens when the finite touches the infinite without proper preparation. The question that comes out of chapter 10, the wound that Leviticus spends the next 15 chapters slowly walking toward, is this: how does anyone survive the presence of a God this holy? That question hangs over everything that follows. Hold on to it. Chapters 11 through 15 look on the surface like the most tedious stretch in the Bible. Clean and unclean animals, purification after childbirth, skin diseases, bodily discharges, laws about mold in a house. I know, but here's what's actually happening underneath all of it. God is training a nation to see, to notice the difference between clean and unclean in everything, in what they eat, in their physical bodies, in how they treat their homes. The eye has to learn before the heart can follow. He is building a habit of discernment into the smallest details of daily life, because the people about to enter a land saturated with foreign practices need to know how to recognize the difference between set apart and contaminated. Before you can deal with deep rupture, you have to develop the reflex of noticing rupture at all. Chapter 10 pauses over childbirth, the miracle of new life, and says even this requires purification. Not because birth is shameful, because even the most beautiful, generative thing a human body can experience still happens inside a broken frame. Nothing escapes the need for restoration. Even beauty has a wound in it. That's not pessimism, that's honesty. And then the skin disease chapters, 13 and 14, which are more layered than they look. The priest here becomes a kind of diagnostician. His job isn't to heal, his job is to name. And the picture of how sin works is written right into the disease itself. It starts on the surface, it can go deeper, it can spread to the whole household. What does the restoration ritual look like for someone who has been healed? 2 birds are brought. One is killed over fresh water, its blood is mixed into the water. The other bird is dipped in that blood mixture and then released, alive, out into the open sky. It flies away carrying the blood of the dead bird. One dies, one goes free carrying the blood of the one that died. If that sounds familiar, it should. God is whispering the same story in multiple languages simultaneously, and chapter 14 is one of the quieter verses. Most people never even notice it. Chapter 15 covers the most ordinary, uncontrollable functions of the body, and the frame that makes the most sense of it is this. God is saying that the human body, and its most mundane, everyday state, is broken and in need of restoration. That is not a statement of shame, it is a diagnosis. A good doctor doesn't shame you for being sick. He names it so it can be treated. These chapters are God in the role of physician. The diagnosis is real, and a diagnosis is only good news if a cure exists. Which brings us to chapter 16. Stop for a second. Everything from chapter 1 to chapter 15, the 5 sacrifices, the ordained priests, Aaron's silent grief, the 2 birds, the purity laws, all of it has been preamble. All of it has been context. Chapter 16 is where Leviticus was always trying to get. This is the Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur, the most sacred day in the Jewish calendar, the beating heart of this entire book. And if you've ever wondered why that day carries such extraordinary weight even today, thousands of years later, you are about to understand. Here's what happens. Aaron, the man dressed in gold and blue and 12 gemstones, strips all of it off. On this day, he wears plain white linen, no ornaments, no gold plate, no 12 names on his chest. He approaches the presence of God not as a decorated representative of an entire nation, but as what he actually is, a sinner walking toward holiness. And before he can do anything for the people, he has to deal with himself first. He sacrifices a bull for his own sin. Aaron, the high priest, the most spiritually positioned man in Israel, is still a sinner, still needs atonement, still cannot stand before God on his own merit. The first blood shed on this day is for the man who will shed it. Then 2 goats are brought forward. Lots are cast to determine their roles.
One goat is designated for God as a sin offering. This one will be slaughtered. The other is designated as the scapegoat. These are 2 parts of one message, not 2 separate rituals, but 2 halves of a single answer. Aaron takes the blood of the first goat and does something no ordinary Israelite ever did. He parts the curtain and walks into the Holy of Holies, the innermost room of the tabernacle, the place where the Ark of the Covenant rests. Leviticus 16:2 records God himself saying he appears in the cloud above the mercy seat. This isn't metaphor or poetry. The room is inhabited. To enter without the right preparation is to die. Nadab and Abihu proved that 2 chapters ago. Aaron enters with blood and incense. The incense cloud veils the mercy seat. He sprinkles blood on it once, then 7 times before it. He does the same in the outer chamber. He is purifying the sacred spaces themselves, because even the tabernacle, even the altar, even the room where God dwells has been touched by the contamination of Israel's sin. Everything needs cleansing. Everything. Then he comes back out, and the people exhale. But it's not finished. He approaches the live goat, and he places both hands on its head. Not one, both. The gesture isn't symbolic hand placement. He is leaning forward, pressing his weight into this animal. And Leviticus 16:21 says he confesses out loud over the animal every iniquity, every transgression, every sin of the entire nation of Israel. He names them. He transfers them. He presses everything into the animal's skull with the full weight of both hands. And then the goat is led away. Not killed, not burned, not ritually disposed of, led away by a designated man out of the camp into the wilderness, into a land described as uninhabited, desolate, cut off. Leviticus 16:22 says the goat carries all their iniquities on itself to a remote place and is released in the wilderness. Let that land, not covered, not suppressed, not filed away in a divine database somewhere, carried, physically removed, taken somewhere it cannot return from. The Israelites standing at the edge of the camp would have watched the man lead the goat past the boundary, then into the open desert, and eventually just the goat, growing smaller on the horizon, and smaller until it was gone. What just left? Everything. Every failure of the past year, every violation, every broken covenant, every sin they knew about and every sin they didn't, walking away on 4 legs into a wilderness it wouldn't survive. And when it disappeared, when the horizon swallowed it completely, the thing it was carrying disappeared with it. This is what the 2 a.m. guilt never accounts for, the possibility of actual removal. Not management, not coping strategies, not reframing the memory into something more bearable, removal. The scapegoat isn't the metaphor for suppression. It is God enacting a promise in flesh and blood and desert sand that sin can be taken somewhere it doesn't come back from. He is not saying, I'll help you live with this. He is saying, I will solve this. The theological backbone that makes all of it possible lands in chapter 17. Leviticus 17:11, "For the life of the flesh is in the blood, and I have given it for you on the altar to make atonement for your souls, for it is the blood that makes atonement by the life." That sentence is everything. Blood matters because blood carries life, and only life can answer for life. When something dies on that altar, something real is being exchanged, not as a transaction, but as a portrait. A life laid down in the place of a life that should have been forfeited. The altar is a substitution story told over and over, until it becomes true in a way no one has yet fully grasped. Chapters 18 and 19 shift gears, and the shift is deliberate. The scapegoat removes guilt. But what about the life you live between one day of atonement and the next? Chapter 18 draws careful boundaries around intimacy and family. Not because God is embarrassed by sexuality, he invented it. But he also knows what misuse costs, and he is drawing a protective circle around what's sacred. Not to restrict joy, to protect it. And then chapter 19. This is the one that breaks people's assumptions about this book completely. Because sitting right there in the middle of all these ancient laws and sacrificial codes and purity regulations, in the book everyone skips, is Leviticus 19:18. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. Jesus quotes it. Paul calls it the fulfillment of the entire law. James calls it the royal law. And it has always been here, in Leviticus, the book everyone abandons. That changes the picture entirely. The scapegoat ritual was never the whole story. God doesn't just want the guilt removed from your account, he wants you changed. The ritual points outward, to blood, to a priest, to an animal walking into the wilderness. But the ethics of chapter 19 point inward, to the daily choices that either honor or dishonor the image of God in everyone around you.
When you've actually experienced the weight being lifted, you treat people differently. Ritual and ethics aren't competing, they work together. The sacrifice makes the love possible. Chapters 20 through 22 establish the cost of covenant. The closer you stand to the fire, the more it shapes you. Higher access means higher responsibility. The priests in chapter 20 cannot live carelessly. Those who carry the most proximity to God bear the most weight of what that proximity demands. Holiness isn't the privilege to be managed, it's a pressure that transforms everything it touches. The person standing closest to the flame looks different than everyone else. And then chapter 23 unfolds something extraordinary that most people blow right past: the 7 feasts of Israel. Passover, unleavened bread, first fruits, Pentecost, trumpets, the Day of Atonement, tabernacles. 7 festivals woven into the annual calendar of an entire civilization, each one tied to a specific date and a specific ritual. And if you've ever wondered what it looks like for a nation to have the gospel embedded in its schedule before the gospel arrived, this is it. Passover. A lamb dies and a people are freed. First fruits. The first grain of the harvest is offered back to God, a resurrection in agricultural form.
Pentecost, 50 days after first fruits, the giving of the Spirit, the Day of Atonement, the scapegoat, the blood, the holy room, the weight carried away. The feasts aren't Israel's invention. They are God's autobiography, written into an annual calendar centuries before the events of the New Testament fulfilled every single one of them. He built the answer into the liturgy before the question was fully formed. Chapter 24 holds 2 things that feel unrelated until you look at them together. The lampstand in the tabernacle burns continuously. Leviticus 24 verse 2 calls it a regular practice before God, day after day, without interruption. The light does not go out. And immediately after, a man is put to death for cursing the name of God. These aren't contradictions, they're the same statement. A God who refuses to let the light be extinguished is also a God who refuses to let what is holy become cheap. The lamp and the judgment are one truth. Then chapter 25, and this is where Leviticus stops being about ritual and becomes something that should disturb a modern reader in the best possible way. The year of Jubilee. Every 50 years in Israel, the entire economic structure of the nation undergoes a complete reset. Leviticus 25 verse 10 calls it a consecrated year, a liberty proclaimed throughout all the land. Debts canceled, slaves released, land returned to its original family. Every Israelite who sold their land out of poverty gets it back. Every person who sold themselves into debt servitude walks free. The entire civilization gets a fresh start. Think about what this actually is. The scapegoat ritual applied not just to individual souls, but to broken systems, to inherited poverty, to generational debt, to the kind of structural oppression that makes escape feel impossible no matter how hard you work. Once every 50 years, God built a liberation mechanism directly into the law. God doesn't just want clean hearts, He wants clean economies. He doesn't just want guilt lifted from individuals, He wants the weight lifted from communities, from families, from the people who didn't create the system they were born into. And here's the connection most people miss entirely. In Luke 4 verse 18, Jesus stands in a synagogue, opens the scroll of Isaiah and reads, "The Spirit of the Lord is on me, because He has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim freedom for the prisoners and recovery of sight for the blind, to set the oppressed free, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor." He closes the scroll, sits down, and says, "Today this scripture is fulfilled in your hearing." The year of the Lord's favor. That's Jubilee language. Isaiah was quoting Leviticus, and Jesus was announcing, right at the opening of His public ministry, that He is the fulfillment of everything Jubilee was pointing toward: the ultimate debt cancellation, the permanent liberation, the return to what was always meant to be. He didn't come to abolish Leviticus, He came to become what Leviticus had been drawing all along. Chapter 26 is the covenant's final statement: blessings for faithfulness, curses for rebellion, rains in season and abundant harvests, or drought, defeat, exile, the land itself rejecting its people. And it reads like someone who loves you enough to tell you exactly what walking away will cost. Not as a threat, but because they are serious about this relationship. Because real love doesn't traffic in vague warnings. Real love tells you the truth clearly enough that you can't pretend you didn't know. But then, verse 44. After all of it, after every curse is laid out in devastating detail, after exile and scattering and the worst consequences of their own choices are described with unflinching honesty, Leviticus 26 verse 44 says, "Yet for all that, when they are in the land of their enemies, I will not spurn them, neither will I abhor them, so as to destroy them utterly and break my covenant with them. For I am the Lord their God." Even then, even in exile, even at their most broken, even after every warning was ignored and every chance was wasted, God draws a line and refuses to cross it. He will not let go of what he loves. The covenant is not conditional on their performance. It is anchored in his character. He will not let go of the people he called his own, not even when those people have done everything in their power to make him. That is not a legal clause in a contract. That is love talking. And it changes the entire weight of the curses that come before it, because a God who says, "even then," is not a God looking for reasons to condemn you. He is a God who has already decided that walking away from you is not an option he is willing to take. And chapter 27 closes the whole thing quietly, almost in a whisper after everything that just happened. When people dedicated things to God, property, animals, themselves, there was always a redemption price, a specific path to buy it back. Everything dedicated, everything lost, everything surrendered, it all had a way back. The final word Leviticus speaks before it closes is that nothing is beyond the reach of redemption. Nothing. Not even the things you've already given over. Now stand back for a moment. Look at the whole thing. Every sacrifice was a question, 5 questions, asked 5 different ways, representing every category of human brokenness. And the scapegoat was the loudest answer, a living animal loaded with the total weight of a nation's failure, led to the edge of the known world and released into a place of no return. Not covered, not suppressed, not hidden in a filing cabinet somewhere. Carried away. Leviticus 16 verse 22 doesn't use the language of covering, it uses the language of removal, distance, a direction and a destination from which sin does not return. The Israelites who watched that goat disappear understood something in their bones that most modern people have completely forgotten. Guilt can actually leave, not be managed, not be medicated, not be processed into something more bearable, loaded onto something else, watched, and then gone. Hebrews 9 verse 7 tells us the high priest entered that inner room only once a year and never without blood. Year after year, the same ritual, the same goat, the same reset, because the same guilt returned.
The scapegoat was a magnificent answer, but it was a temporary one, a shadow. And shadows only exist because something solid is casting them, with a light source behind it. Centuries later, a man was led out of a city carrying a wooden beam. He was taken outside the walls, outside the camp, just like the scapegoat, to a place called the skull. And the weight of every sin from every person in every generation was pressed onto him, not by one set of trembling hands, by the full force of divine intent. And he walked into a desolation. And Hebrews 9:26 says he appeared once for all at the culmination of the ages to do away with sin by the sacrifice of himself, not cover it, do away with it. The scapegoat carried the sins into the wilderness and was released. Jesus carried them into death and left them there. The goat was always a shadow. The 2 birds in chapter 14 were a shadow. The feasts were shadows. The high priest in his white linen was a shadow. Every ritual from chapter 1 to chapter 27 was a shadow, and Jesus is the substance the shadow was always cast by. He didn't arrive and surprise the Old Testament. He was woven into every feast, every blood offering, every skin law, every jubilee, every grain offering, every fire on an altar that was never allowed to go out. Leviticus is not a book about ancient hygiene. It's not an outdated manual for a religion that no longer exists. It is a portrait,
detailed and painstaking and blood-soaked, of a God who cannot rest until the thing he loves most is clean, who spoke from inside the tent, not from a safe distance, because he refuses to let the gap stand, who dressed a broken man in the names of his people and sent him into the most dangerous room in existence, who loaded an animal with unbearable weight and watched it walk away into the wilderness, who wrote the same story into the calendar, into the economy, into the skin laws, into the structure of time itself, so that when the final scapegoat arrived, nobody who had been paying attention would be surprised. The weight you're carrying right now, whatever you've done, whatever you've left undone, whatever keeps following you into quiet rooms and waking you at 2 a.m., was not meant to be permanent. The entire elaborate blood and fire system of Leviticus exists to tell you one thing. There is a way to be actually clean. Not forgiven on paper. Actually clean. The kind of clean where the thing is carried away and doesn't come back. The kind of clean where you watch it disappear on the horizon and it's gone. It's strange, maybe, that the book everyone skipped turned out to be the one holding the answer to the thing everyone feels. But that's Leviticus, the cold case that was never actually cold. The clues were always there. You just had to follow them, past the strange food laws and the skin disease diagnostics and the 2 birds and the quiet grief of a father who couldn't mourn, all the way to a goat walking into the wilderness with everything, and then further still, to a cross where the shadow finally became the thing itself. The question is whether the goat has walked away with yours, and if you've actually watched it go, or if you're still standing at the edge of the camp, calling it back.